Good day and welcome to NAM's podcast. Today we are introducing a new format for delivering information to our donors, our clients, our supporters, our volunteers, and the community in general. We appreciate all that the community does, and this is just one more way for us to communicate to the community and those that are close to NAM. So we appreciate you listening in today. In 1983, 40 years ago, a social worker named Rosemary Hornsby was studying the concept of social ministry. She noticed it was being operated in other parts of Houston, and she wanted to know if it could possibly work serving the Northwest community area. At that time, the unemployment was at record high levels, inflation was going through the roof. The oil industry was hurting and suffering, and there were a lot of families that were in need that were beyond the scope of a lot of the congregation and other service organizations could address. So she discussed the concept with her minister, Dr. Glenn Wilkerson at Cypress Creek Christian Church, who invited her to present the idea to the Northwest Clergy Association as part of a service project. So in April 1983, she presented this idea that is now what we know as Northwest Assistance Ministries. It was an experiment that they backed, that they really got behind. 10 local congregations pooled their resources, volunteers, assets, furniture, financial assets as well. And in November of 1983, what is now known as Northwest Assistance Ministries, or NAM, opened up with a small food pantry, assistance program, and a resale shop. And it was in a small storefront along 1960 that was being donated by the owner. And to grow from a $10,000 budget to a nearly $12 million budget is pretty remarkable. And I think we can all agree that this experiment is probably could be considered a success at this time. As a community that NAM served continued to grow and offer new challenges, NAM provided answers in the form of expanded services. And over the years, we have brought new programs for our neighbors in need. Today, guided by a staff of about 75 and an army of more than 3,000 volunteers, NAM is supported by over 100 congregations, more than 50 affiliate organizations, and over 200 business neighbors. So now with an annual budget of $12 million, NAM impacted the lives of more than 122,000 people last year. So as we are celebrating our 40th anniversary, our guest today is the CEO and President of Northwest Assistance Ministries, Mr. Les Cave. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
So what do you think when you hear this story, how it started? And the minister still has a napkin, by the way. He brings it to meetings. It started as notes on a napkin up at a restaurant, and now NAM is a leader in the community, a leader in community service, and a leader in helping people. What do you think when you hear about that transition over 40 years?
Well, I was in Houston in 1983 and remember the infancy of NAM and really how small it was at that time. But I also knew there were not a whole lot of places people could go to in Northwest Houston when they needed help. And so what I think about is look how far we've come to size that you describe, and you look at the area that NAM serves. I spent most of my career working inside Loop 610, and the area that NAM serves is probably identical to the area inside Loop 610. There are, number of people 600,000 people live inside Loop 610, but there's over 1 million that live out in this part of the world. So I'm impressed, first of all, with the presence of NAM and the size of NAM and the range of services that NAM provides to clients. And then you look at the board of directors. When I talk to the board of directors and ask them how they became affiliated with NAM, why they're connected to NAM, and they say, well, because we make gifts that help people right here in our backyard. And they take ownership of this community, and they support the activities of NAM because it supports their community. And you also, I'm so impressed with the roots that you just described and the formal alliance that we continue with the congregations in Northwest Houston. In fact, I think you mentioned there were maybe 10 congregations in the formation of NAM, and I think round numbers, there are probably 50 or more congregations involved with NAM, and we have those quarterly meetings to keep those connections and to keep the communication going back and forth, so that as things develop at NAM that need to be shared with the community, we use the Alliance to help do that, and as the Alliance detects new community needs, they share that with NAM, and we have a good communication loop working there with them. So when you look at the territory that we're responsible to serve and the lack of other services up here, you look at the commitment of the donors and the board of directors and the volunteers, and then you look at the involvement that we still have, strong involvement with those congregations. That's what I think about, is really how well guided the organization has been over this 40 years. I've just been here for 5 of it, so it's not patting myself on the back.
Well, you've had a very, very professional career. You've been in fundraising and nonprofit leadership for, we'll just say, a few decades.
Okay.
How about that?
More than a few.
And you've seen a lot of organizations, not just around Houston, national organizations, university organizations, health organizations. But I think it's safe to say that NAM is a unique entity, not just an organization. What is it about NAM that makes it unique and makes it different?
It's a really good question, and it's something that almost changes every experience I have with our clients and with our staff. First of all, I go back to my answer a little bit earlier, my response a little earlier about how far away people come to NAM for help because there's nothing available in their area. And then you look at the professionalism and the compassion of the people that they work with here, the staff of NAM, and you see how the staff of NAM truly enjoy being able to assist other people. And so there is the clients, as they come in and as they receive assistance, they witness that and they appreciate that because people are often embarrassed or are ashamed to come in and ask for help because there's, American way, we're supposed to all be able to take care of ourselves and do all that. And so whenever they're treated with respect and dignity and compassion, they appreciate that much more because they do not have to lose their pride to come here and get a little assistance. Usually it's a short-term need. And so I really look at this staff here as precious. That would be my answer. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. I think that when you tie the staff and the compassion that they show with the community involvement that is at the DNA of NAM, I think you do get something that is very different and very special.
Mm-hmm. And our volunteers who often are working right along staff, it's some days you can't tell who the volunteer is and who the staff is. They get to dispel a lot of myths that you see about people who come needing assistance. They get to see that these are people just like them sitting across the table from them. And what do they say? For the grace of God, that could be me. So our volunteers who work here, as they're going back to their churches, they're going back to their country clubs, and they're talking to people about their work at NAM, it really better identifies the people who come to NAM and need assistance than what people might conceive of it. They've never been here, never sat across the table from somebody who's asking for help.
That's a great lead into the next question. Thank you for reading ahead. We've both been involved with organizations that have volunteers, and I think every organization values their volunteers, and we always have great things to say. And as you were speaking right there about how the NAM volunteers they're special, and of course we're saying that from an insider's view, but I think they are special. Put a little bit more into your thoughts on the NAM volunteers, not only what you were saying about what they do in the community, but the impact that they have internally in NAM and the impact that they have on our programs and services.
Well, they're inspirational because, we're 40 years old, and some of the volunteers have been here the entire 40 years. And that's their commitment to their community. And so I think that we listen to them, we ask questions of them, and they can give us good guidance about where we've been and what we've done, and as we decide where we are heading. Probably the program that I think of the most when I think of our volunteers is the Meals on Wheels, where we have almost 900 homebound seniors and others who get a daily meal. And volunteers come here, they pick up the hot meals and the milk and the fruits and the bread and deliver it one by one to those homes, and while they're there they check in on them, and if the person receiving the meal has a need, they bring that back to NAM, and we contact their emergency contact so that gives them help. And we recently received a letter from a son who was writing us because his father was a Meals on Wheels recipient and was able to finish his life in his own beloved home, and had this volunteer coming by every day with a hot meal and a check-in to see how he was doing. And he said that it really gave his father great joy, and it gave the family great peace to have that as the father aged and the family became even more involved with his day-to-day care. And so maybe we don't always think deeply about our volunteers and the impact that they have, but when we hear it from a client or a family member of a client, we remember how valuable what they're doing. And it's the same as the volunteers in the pantry who are helping people with their food needs. It was a group of volunteers who helped found our domestic violence area, family violence center, when they saw that some of the clients who were visiting NAM spoke of being in an abusive relationship. Next thing you know, they found a grant. Next thing you know, they applied for the grant. Next thing you know, we have a program now to help victims of domestic violence, and there's more of those than you would ever imagine. These volunteers are precious to us, and it's nice to sit down and talk to them and say, okay, what are your ideas? What are your thoughts as we evolve? Because we just went through a whole change in operations during the coronavirus due to health concerns, because we don't want to give the people that are getting our meals to get sick, and we don't want our staff and our volunteers to get sick, and so they help us as we make those kind of complicated changes so that we can continue our service and do it safely.
With an organization the size of NAM, with the history and with the expanded palette of programs that we offer, what is the greatest challenge in leading an organization like NAM?
The greatest. You want me to give you
besides trying to keep your chief advancement officer in line, it would be something other than that.
Yeah, I just throw up my hands about that. You see so many people, and they have such a variety of areas that they need help. And I think the most challenging for not only me, but for the board and for all of us is, what are our priorities? Where do we make the biggest impact? And what is sustainable? And then where can we bring in a partner organization to help out so that we aren't ignoring or avoiding those community needs? It's just that it doesn't have to all be done by Northwest Assistance Ministries. The programs that we have we're good at, and then the partners who we teamed up with are good at what they do. For instance, the SNAP program, the Medicare program, who come in and they enroll people in Medicare and they enroll people in the food stamp program so that they're not dependent on our pantry for everything. And so we can focus on having food and having volunteers and serving the clients in the pantry, and then we can rely on others to take care of the client's other needs, which we know are there, but it's just something. So I'd say that it's identifying those priorities and staying focused on those, and then identifying those collaborations that'll be a benefit to our service, and then occasionally you need to review everything you're doing and see if perhaps something is out of date. We don't do that very often because we don't see that very often, but it will come. There will come a time that something will no longer need to be done by Northwest Assistance Ministries, and we'll have to recognize that and decide what to do.
Another great lead into the next question. The one thing I am very proud of that we do, and I've seen it really on 2 occasions following Harvey and the devastation that we saw all around the community and all across the Southeast Texas area. And then again during the pandemic that you mentioned, is how quickly NAM was able to transition from a day-to-day human service organization to an emergency relief organization, to expand programs, to address twists and turns and program delivery. And a lot of organizations that we see they're unable to do that, even over a long period of time, and sometimes they choose not to because of that reason. What is it about NAM and our structure and our program delivery and our community ties that allows us to transition so quickly, sometimes in a matter of hours or days?
And you're right, we did have a chance to experience that over the last 3 years. Just to define it a little more clearly, we wrapped up our Tropical Storm Harvey relief in December of 2019, and then 3 months later, in March of 2020, is when we had to implement the steps for the pandemic. And so from what we thought was getting out of the relief business, we actually got even deeper into the relief business because of all the needs that came along with that pandemic. And I'll come at this from 2 different directions to answer your question. One is looking at from a structure or corporate perspective. We're a fairly flat organization. There's not a lot of bureaucracy here at NAM, and that's how we're able to make everybody's dollar go that much farther, is because it's not funding a big bureaucracy. So we can make decisions and communicate them throughout the organization quickly, and people at the ground level can give us feedback very quick, just as quickly, and we can make alterations so that we respond well. So that's from a kind of a structure, a corporate point of view. But from another point of view, more human point of view, is we enjoy working together. We really do. Everybody here really seems to enjoy working with their co-workers, working at Northwest Assistance Ministries. And so we put a lot of maybe our personal wants and desires aside when it comes time to making some changes that will help us better serve our clients, because our clients and our mission is what's more important to us than our own little personal needs or our own egos, or however you want to define it. So I think you look at the structure as flat, and then you look at the way that the organization works well together and made up of a lot of talented, committed individuals, and I think that's how we adapt so well. But, I still remember the early days of the pandemic when we had to have permission to be out on the streets, and I signed 50 letters so that if somebody was pulled over by the law, they would show the letter and say, yes, it's okay for me to be out of the house and be in the community because I am an essential worker. And I remember you asked, I think the county commissioner's office, are we an essential organization? They said, if you just had one of the programs that you operate in operation, that makes you an essential organization. With the 10 programs that you're operating, you're, I don't know what the right word is, but certainly essential. So I remember all that, and very proud of how we were able to do that. And now things have relaxed a little bit, and this health scare is not as acute as it was 3 years ago, and we're experimenting with ways to roll back some of those things that we had to put in place, and see how we can how we operate going forward.
Well, here's hoping we get more than a three-month holiday between disasters. So NAM has evolved from a complete volunteer organization where they had 4 desks put together to a $12 million organization with 2 buildings on a large campus that is busy all the time. Looking forward into the future, where do you see NAM? Where do you see NAM going in the future? And things do happen. We all know that, things out of our control, and as we just talked about, disasters that need our attention. But if you were to say where you thought NAM would be in 5 or 10 years, what do you see?
Boy, don't hold me to this, but this is what, as today, April of 2023, I see, and I'll use this as an example. It was in the latter part of our Harvey relief program, Tropical Storm Harvey relief program, that we began hearing need of behavioral health workers. It's something that we didn't have. We could refer people to it, but it was a very awkward and long, it took a long time to get help if you needed to talk to a counselor or therapist or even be evaluated by a psychiatrist. But because the community and our congregation saw that in their offices, we began to explore putting in behavioral health. And now we have quite a robust behavioral health program. And by that I mean it's busy. We're seeing children from the area schools that are referred to us. We're seeing adults, and then we see families. So they really did hit the nail on the head when they identified behavioral health as a priority for us to add to our existing programs. And then, thank goodness for the funding that we have received for that. We've been able to provide that behavioral health and sustain it. So, and then you look beyond that. So that's just an example. We're going to get feedback, and we're going to test it, see if there's funding for it, and test the need for it, and then add programs. I think we're going to see more collaborations because we're in discussion right now with the Houston Food Bank, and in a really powerful collaboration with them to co-locate some of our services with their upcoming central office. And I think, so we'll see collaborations, we'll see partnerships, and we may see some improvements in accessibility, where we find areas that have substantial needs that have a hard time accessing us here. And through high tech, telehealth, or Zoom, we serve people in those areas, make a special effort to get to those people in those areas, or perhaps we locate some of our services in those areas. So, we've got this wonderful facility here, and then we have with 80,000 square feet, and then we have another building which, for the most part, houses our vocational training, which is almost brand new. So we have facilities here to grow in, and we have some opportunities through collaborations and partnerships to be out decentralized a bit. So I think I see that, and that's kind of a sustainable way to expand, and that's part of the key to expansion, is not just to be able to do it for a year or two, but to put it in place and people to count on it being there.
I can see all that and more. Last question. In your time here, do you have a moment or an event, a story that really defines in your mind who NAM is?
I have a ton of them. Let me stop and ponder that question for just a minute. Of course, we talked just now about the transition from December of 2019 to March of 2020, going from tropical storm relief to health disaster. This one example here, which really moved me, happened during the pandemic. In Christmas of 2020, we advertised for people to sign up for Christmas gifts, and we didn't realize how many were going to sign up so quickly, and we almost had double the number of families who asked for help than we had originally planned for. And of course, you can't go back to them and say, I'm sorry, that was our mistake, you're not going to be able to get toys this year. We wish it, we didn't do that, we can't do that. So then we began to talk to people about what an overwhelming need we're seeing at Christmas time, because so many people lost their jobs and so many people were cut back on their hours during that pandemic in 2020. And then we go to our neighbors and we ask them to help these families out, do a little bit more this year than they did the year before. And thinking about that, it reminds me of the good people who we associate with as donors, as congregations, and school systems. And I can remember the response from the three school systems that we most closely connect to, and that'd be the Spring School District, the Klein School District, and the Aldine School District. Because if you think about schools at that time, it was no win. Parents complained because their children weren't in class. Parents complained because the children were in class. Parents complained because the children weren't wearing masks. Parents complained because the children were wearing masks. And in all of that turmoil, the school systems went above and beyond what you would expect, and we received enough toys from them and from the congregations and so forth to respond to that need and have enough toys for everybody. And so I just look at that as symbolic of how this community so thoughtfully and generously responds whenever we say, a lot of families need help this Christmas, or the pantry has, we're short on peanut butter and we sure need, and all of a sudden you get food drives for peanut butter. We're short on volunteers for Meals on Wheels, and all of a sudden people come in and start signing up to be a Meals on Wheels volunteer. People come along and they help us set up the technology that it took to keep our learning center operating during the pandemic. And so we're really fortunate who we're associated with, who our past leadership had been. And even though we have challenges in this community because of the great needs, we're fortunate to be here. I remember board members talking to me as they would be in my office and we'd look out over the parking lot and they'd see all the cars and they'd say, I really wish this many people didn't need our help. Wish that we could help them and they didn't have to come back again. And really, we do. There are a lot of people who come to us one time or come to us for one class and then they find themselves in a better place. But then the board member would add, but I'm so grateful that we're here for these families, no matter how many they are. And that seems to be the prevailing spirit of this organization and of this community. We mourn the fact that so many people need our help, but we celebrate the fact that we're able to help so many people.
Well, thank you. And by the way, we do need peanut butter in our pantry, and we do need volunteers for Meals on Wheels. So we will be sending that word out. Les, thank you for joining us on this podcast. My name is Brian Carr. I'm the Chief Advancement Officer, and we thank you for tuning in today. You can find this podcast on our website at namonline.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you.